Welcome to morning session, Energy Drive Social Responsibility. That's actually a pretty interesting topic in the context of what is happening in the industry. My name is Bartosz, Wojszczyk, and I'm actually co-founder and CEO of a company that deals with the disruptive startups. So we have technology in the pipeline for wireless power transfer. We have technology in the pipeline that can deliver renewable energy generation at 3.9 cents a kilowatt hour in other conditions, and a couple other things. So when we deal with the social responsibility, we look at how to truly transform the energy industry, knowing that infrastructure is outdated, very much outdated. Everyone talks smart grid, Internet of Things, and stuff like that. And everyone wants to invest, but at the end of the day, who pays for all the energy investment? All of us sitting in this room, because everything is passed through on the rate basis to the customer. So it's hard to be socially responsible and yet still figure out how to be business profitable and make all the puzzles kind of come together. In the last couple of years, I actually lived in Asia when I was a chief innovation officer for one of the largest energy companies. And from one of our utilities, who basically supplies electricity to Metro Manila, we had an interesting dilemma, combining basically innovation and social responsibility, which is 60% of our customers were low social economic group, less than $100 a month income. And the cost of electricity represented about 30% of share of wallet on the monthly basis. And on the other hand, we had a whole bunch of semiconductoring industry providing 60% of country's GDP. So how do you become innovative and socially responsible when you have a huge disparity of energy, who's your recipient of the energy? So my point for today, and I wrote the panelists will provide also their point of view on the topic of this panel session. My point is that everyone talks about the social responsibilities. There is a cost to social responsibility, and yet no one is willing to change the lifestyle to accommodate sometimes premium cost of all the innovations that are happening and be socially responsible within that framework. And a good example is 2008 when the market crashed and oil prices went up. Everyone thought that in North America would change the habit of how we drive. Big trucks, we're in Texas, so I hope I'm not going to offend someone. Big trucks, the small vehicles, that hasn't changed. Yeah, we have smaller cars and more electric vehicles, but actually the trend didn't tip over toward the smaller, more efficient yet. So my point is, again, social responsibility costs. Unless we change the lifestyle, we have to pay a premium price to be socially responsible. That's my kind of point, which means we are okay to be controversial at this panel. This is supposed to kind of trigger the discussion. With that, I would like to ask each of the panelists to kind of introduce themselves, who they work for, what they do, and kind of put their point of view on the topic of this session, which is energy drives social responsibility. Let's start with the first.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Peter Muhoro with Pedernales Electric Cooperative. We're a utility here in Texas, based in the Hill Country, headquartered in Johnson City, Texas. So once you come out of Austin City limits, we start to pick up out there, and we go all the way really, really far out. We cover a territory about the size of the state of Massachusetts, 8,100 square miles. A little bit about, maybe I should just mention a little bit about electric co-ops. About over 900 electric co-ops in the U.S. Cover over 70% of the landmass in the U.S., many million miles of line, and provide somewhere between 12 to 15% of energy all over the U.S. So rural electric co-ops make a big impact here in the U.S. Our territory covers two very distinct areas. One is a very urban area, as you can tell, into the San Antonio, Austin-San Antonio corridor. We cover that area, as well as our western territory in the Junction area, very, very rural. So we're talking 2 meters to a mile on that side, and then 50 meters to a mile on this side. And so a lot of complexities. I wear the hat of overseeing research and strategy initiatives at the co-op, And that means my job is to constantly think about where we need to be tomorrow, what are some of the technologies we need to be looking at. And one of the questions that we do like to ask is sustainability, and how do we address that? Now, the reason I painted the picture based on our territory is the fact that we have members of different classes. So, but as a co-op, one of the things, our goal is not to please any shareholder. One of the things that we do intend to do is never collect more than we need to maintain our operations successfully and remain favorable as a utility. And so at any point, we do issue back capital credits. We're not a nonprofit organization. And so as we think of sustainability, one of the key things that I hope to get through this with this discussion, and I hope we make it a very interesting discussion, is what are some of the things that at the end of the day, currently historically utilities have been the ones who provided energy to everyone. Now, we see more and more getting into what we can call prosumers, those who produce as well as consume. And so there's a lot of things that are changing as we move forward in the future. And so as a utility, the questions that we have to ask ourselves is, what are the things that we need to be doing in terms of sustainability, and how do we work with both our commercial as well as residential members to find the best solutions for them as we look at sustainability. So my hope is that by the time we're done with this conversation, we can begin to not only give you all some of the ideas of the things that we're doing, but at the same time, get ideas from what utilities should be doing, because not every utility is as forward thinking because they're used to their business model. But we know we're at a time when we really have to think twice about how do we conduct our business. So that's pretty much a spiel of where I think we'll be having. I think it's going to be a fun conversation talking about sustainability, and I look forward to this.
Thanks. I'm Paul Westbrook. I work at Texas Instruments, been there for 32 years. Most of my time has been in the group that designs our large semiconductor manufacturing facilities. We've got over 20 million square feet of large manufacturing facilities worldwide. My last decade has been primarily involved in energy and resource efficiency at those. We built the first LEED Gold semiconductor factory in the world in Richardson, Texas, right up the road here near Dallas. And we've done several other large LEED facilities. So we've kind of embraced the energy efficiency as certainly a business case, but it also contributes heavily to our sustainability. We've done corporate citizenship reports since 2005. And if you look at TI's social investment, it's been heavily in education because it's a little self-serving in that we need a lot of engineers to be successful, and so we support education. But if you look at us from an environmental standpoint, our energy consumption and our water consumption with our large global manufacturing base, which still about 40% of it is here in Texas, is probably our biggest impact on the planet, and how we can best serve the communities we're in by taking less water, using less energy to still manufacture, have the jobs. So that's been my challenge over the last decade, and we've actually had pretty good success in cutting our energy and water consumption per chip that we manufacture. So I'm bringing a little bit of a corporate perspective from an actual large user. I also have a very energy efficient home, which is solar energy, and I interact with my co-op, not his co-op, who's a little resistant to change. So I've got some personal perspective on the issue as well.
Good morning. My name is Bartosz. I serve as the president and CEO for a company called ENBALA Power Networks. And what ENBALA does is we focus on how do we leverage behind the meter assets and use them for grid services. A wide variety of our customers participate in programs such as frequency regulation, demand response programs. And typically, as it relates to this panel, typically our end customers justify what they're planning to do with their facility through sustainability type metrics, very similar to the story here. I will throw out one kind of controversial point back to because I want to.
Cool, go for it.
So you say that the world hasn't changed and we still have the same number of cars and trucks and things like that. So here's an interesting thought for you. The largest taxi cab company in the world doesn't own a taxi cab. It's Uber. The largest resort and hotel booking company in the world doesn't own a single facility. It's Airbnb. So I would actually argue that you can change, people can change, they can take on different behaviors and use different resources when the business model is right. And that's the key in everything that we're talking about around how do we move from the grid of today to the grid of tomorrow, is that if we get the business model right, customers will come. The issues that we're talking about this morning are all about, really, they're a symptom of the business model being wrong. And that's why.
Or a free business enterprise where you're driven by sustainability. Yes, you're reducing your cost of operations by sustainability, but at the end of the day, you have a freedom to do something more than you do in the utility world. The same what you said, Uber and others, they are very much a different business model that lives in the competitive landscape that allows to be much more sustainable, different stuff. So the question then is,
Don't forget, Uber did break down a lot of regulatory.
they're still trying to do it. I call them kind of creating the parallel path, okay, of the same like Tesla. Tesla is breaking every possible, traditional business model, selling directly cars, putting charging stations, offering electricity for free. There's so many things that is happening, but I think in the context of sustainability, it is probably much easier on the corporate side sometimes, or if you're an entrepreneur or startup. Listen, I have one startup that is developing transactive energy business model, and they are trying to get with that model through unregulated space. They're basically saying, I will not go to utility because it's regulated. I'll go to Walmart, Costco, others to kind of roll out this platform as to eliminate what we call a poverty of electricity. They're creating a parallel path, but kind of going back to your point, you're regulated. You're regulated. You have a franchise. How do you become socially responsible when you have more constraints probably than opportunities?
So a little bit about electric cooperatives. Very few are actually regulated.
Okay.
In fact, most electric co-ops and munis are governed by their boards and their city council. Now, the PUC here in Texas does not regulate what we do. We try to stay up with what the PUC is doing, just to be friends. You don't want to make enemies. And so it allows us to actually have the flexibility to do some things, unlike what investor-owned utilities would have certain regulations. Now, that being said, some of the things people don't remember is that as a distribution, we're an electric distribution cooperative, so we do not generate power. We do have some self-generation, and we're looking at some, but we do have a long-term, and when I talk long-term, in the next 30 or so years, contract with our power provider.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where now you start getting tied in some of the things that you're doing. Now, we have the flexibility. That contract only comes up to about 65% of what we are loading. So we have about 35% that we can actually do very unique things that can change. And so that's some of what allows us to have some flexibility. The challenge is that you still have to make sure that you have what you call a fair program for everyone. And when I say that our goal is we never want cross-subsidization. So for example, I never want that my system that I put up, I get certain advantages that someone else who doesn't have the same system is having to pay for it. So as a co-op, we have to make sure that we meet all our members' needs equally and create very fair programs. So how do we get about looking at sustainable things? One of the things we look at is what's some of the self-generation we can look at. Our board just recently passed a resolution reaffirming our goal for 30% renewable capacity by 2020. That's our goal to meet that. Secondly, we do have a goal for additional growth. 20% of that would be covered by energy efficiency and demand response. We are growing very fast. Last year, we just added about 9,000 meters. So in the utility industry, when everyone's declining, we're at about 3.5% growth. So very favorable here in Texas, and we know that Texas has 5 of the fastest growing cities in Texas. 5 of the fastest growing cities in the nation are in Texas. So when we're looking at social sustainability, we have to ask ourselves a few things. One is, what are the programs that we could create that become fair for everyone? So I'll give a good example. Our net metering program, we have set it in such a way that we encourage our residential and commercial customers to install, to self-generate. So in fact, last year we increased our buyback rate so that if they do generate beyond what they need for their household or for their commercial residents, that we do have a favorable rate. Now, we do run into some complexities if it's larger than a certain size because of our contract with LCRA. We have there's a little bit of constraint there, but with our net metering, it allows for us to promote some of those programs. We don't charge for interconnection. We do provide free energy audits for homes so that we can help our customers really understand how do you have an energy efficient home. So from our end, we look at what are the simple things we could do that are fair for everyone, that meets everyone's goals. At the same time, we're not cross-subsidizing.
So the question to everyone, the three of you. You see, I come from Poland. I grew up at the end of the communism times where fairness was a big thing. Everyone had to be treated and had fairness in wealth redistribution, medical redistribution. It's truly a social responsibility about fairness.
I'll let this guy's possible go. I'll come back and go after that. Actually, no, in reality, so I think if you really think of the word fairness, the way I look at it is, I personally look at an environment that I don't want someone else paying for something but I also want to be able to have the choice if I wanted to be able to do something. So for example, if I wanted to put solar in my home, I would like for the opportunity to do it at what I would like to do, but at the same time, I have to remember that there are certain things that are not gonna, so will I get a good payback if I have to sell back to the utility? I'm glad we do offer some good payback, but I know most utilities don't. I mean, he can tell you what he's getting charged for sending back to the grid without getting anything out of it. And so, is it true fairness? I think the way I look at it is that if we could set things up so that we have opportunities for everyone to find a place for what they want, because as a consumer in general, I look at what phone do I want? I want an iPhone. There's a reason and I'm gonna pay a certain amount for it, but that's my choice. And so, but if I'm willing to pay for it personally, I shouldn't expect someone else, I shouldn't expect him to subsidize what I'm paying for my iPhone just because I want an iPhone and he'd prefer to have an Android.
Okay, so fairness in the context of choice.
I'll take a crack at fairness. Fairness is really depending on who's defining it, I guess, right? I mean, that's the case. And I think you see that go read all the conflicting reports on whether rooftop solar is beneficial or costly for a utility. The utility, companies will often write that it's, other customers are subsidizing you if you have solar. But there are other reports that show that the peak load reduction actually benefits every customer. So fairness is all in the eye of the beholder, and we could argue that pretty much all day long.
If I could just touch on something, and this is not getting exciting because you actually hit a really good point. Now, we get a lot of questions that are we ever going to offer rebates for residential rooftop, for example. And we haven't offered rebates, and we don't in the foreseeable future see us offering rebates. But now, what are some of the things that we can do? As electric co-ops, we have the capability to access cheap money. So what if we provided a service that our members can actually, maybe through an on-bill financing or something like that, actually be able to access something at the 2 or 3% interest rate, rather than maybe taking out a loan to put up solar at 7, 8%. Now you actually benefit more than having a rebate. And so for us, that's where we see the whole idea of fairness, is we provide some opportunities, and these are the things that we're looking at doing. How do we create an environment that, yes, we may not offer rebates, but we actually offer an alternative. And I will say this, I think rebates work for a certain amount of time to get things going, but at a certain point they become a crutch and actually can destroy the system. And so there's a certain point that we look at and say, how do we create that fair, something that's actually gonna help everyone. So now everyone has the opportunity to actually consider doing this.
So that goes back to my brief summary, fairness in the context of choice. Okay?
Want to jump in?
Come on, I know you have an opinion, come on.
Can't have it both ways. It's really simple. You can't have it both ways. There's no economic structure that exists today or other industry that exists today that actually has it both ways, right? So we have to decide as an industry. We have on one end of the extreme duty to serve, right, which is clear, and then on the other end of the extreme we have the hey, if you want to buy the iPhone, you want to buy the iPhone version of Power, you want to not buy the iPhone version of Power, go for it. And I think one of the challenges in this industry for years has been trying to carve our way down this middle road. And at the end of the day, it has to go to one extreme or the other. It cannot carve down the middle road.
We all have unfair things imposed on us. If you're a fan of renewables, the fact that our oil industry is subsidized by our military income taxes makes that artificially low. And just as you pointed out, we don't necessarily pay the price for carbon, so there's artificial unfairness in that system too. So yeah, there's unfairness everywhere, right? That's the trick. And so it's at your company, you're dealing with the ones you can control, but there are all these imposed on you, and it makes a really complex picture. But talk what you said earlier about the companies that are evolutionary instead of revolutionary. I think there's really two paths that people try to get to change. Revolutionary is when you just make a stark difference, that the jump that nobody thought about or nobody else had ever done. Evolution is how most people try to do it, right? A little bit at a time. Companies are really resistant to massive change because it's risky and their stockholders don't want to take big risks. And the biggest success we've had at TI in the energy field was when we decided to build a LEED Gold factory in Richardson, and our management structure and everything else fell perfectly in place to let us, as engineers, take the risks we wanted to take and felt like we had support. And that factory is 39% more efficient than its sister fab that's 6 miles down the road. That's like $4 million a year in energy savings.
So let me pull on that string a bit. So at the end of the day, the sustainability or the direction of the sustainability driven by the stakeholder management on the context who you have to pay or who do you have to bring the profit. Because listen, I've worked for big corporations. I'm not going to mention those companies because I don't want to do commercial or anti-commercial for them, but we were sustainable, we were socially responsible, but at the end of the day, there had to be a bottom line. As simple as that. Which means, are we fooling ourselves? Are we kind of almost like lying to ourselves that truly we're so much socially responsible, and yet when it comes to the final determining factor, it's a stakeholder who owns the business, who owns the shares, who is something. Because Uber was successful because there were a whole bunch of entrepreneurs who were not restricted by stakeholders. They said that we can do it differently. The same on Tesla. Other companies tried to build electric vehicles and they didn't succeed at scale. Here comes Tesla, a guy who's basically probably arrogant at that time, said, I can do it, why not? What's the problem? And boom, he did it. So this is actually stakeholder, the delivering a bottom line truly a driver of the sustainability. I'll give you in a second, okay, time to.
Working in a big company, I can tell you that it's the challenge. We have, it's languages. I have to translate everything into finance for it to really catch on. And I can do it for carbon, right? I can show that when we can reduce our electric consumption, because 2/3 of our carbon footprint is from our purchased electricity.
Yeah.
Well, our carbon footprint goes down, which is a good thing, and we save money by using less electricity. And I have to translate all the finances to be.
I know, but when you go to the board, you don't start with the carbon footprint story, you start with the financial. I'm just saying, carbon footprint is a byproduct of your story. I have to do the same thing. So I'm saying, is it truly weird? Again, are we fooling ourselves? Or there's a bigger force that drives our
There's no company that's sustainable, not even close. There are some that are less unsustainable right now. That's probably the difference.
Well, I think I think we actually, and I keep saying this, I think we have a fundamental problem that everyone has always somewhat avoided to address. What is the true cost of electricity? And I think I've had a chance to travel and work different parts of the world, and you see rates from one end to the other. If you ask the average American, where does your power come from? There's a good chance they'll point at the wall. And that, I think, one, I do say it's actually the fault of the utilities in a way, because they've never really, in the US, we've enjoyed cheap electricity and never really translating what the true cost of that is, and not really factored in all the other perspectives. So someone can come in and say, I want to be 100% green, and then you ask them, what does that truly mean? And let's sit down and go through this, and it comes down to what are the economics of it, and from a utilities perspective, we actually are like, hey, if you can be energy efficient, please go for it. If you can put up residential rooftop, it actually helps us, because what we pay in the summertime especially, with the way the Texas system is set up and the cost of transmission, the 4CP, those rates in the summertime, absolutely, that rooftop is actually gonna be a benefit to us because we're having to buy less power. And so, but bottom line, I think if we never really have that true discussion, and I think UT is doing a good job in getting a group of folks to come up with a study that shows what the full cost of electricity is. And I think once we begin to start getting to that conversation, we may have a better conversation in what this sustainability absolutely looks like. I think Bud had a
But
comment.
you want to say something? Come on.
As I'm passing, I'll just say that, companies also have to be financially sustainable to exist and try to do the good things too. So that's the balance we lead. We have to have financial sustainability if we're gonna be around to try to reduce our energy and water
This is
footprint.
well spoken for market competitive business. If you're in the regulated space where every time you try to improve, be more sustainable, you get penalized because now
Yes.
you have to return or you have to kind of give back.
Yep.
That's another topic. I'm not even going to go that path at this
Yes.
point. Anyway, but go ahead.
Oh, come on. Come on. No, the only point I was gonna say was, you made a distinction between, making the right choice around carbon or making, more of an emotive choice as opposed to the financial choice. And this goes back to my Uber example, right? It is actually about the money. It is about the business model, right? Why am I willing to pay a premium for Uber over a taxi cab? Anybody?
Dozens of reasons, but I'll say availability. I mean, that kind of.
Really? So you can,
Yeah,
you can get an Uber faster than you get a taxi
Oh,
cab.
in Austin, absolutely. Austin has the.
Planning out my trip to the airport.
Yellow cab services 50% of demand in Austin.
Okay.
My last driver from Uber had a tie and look clean.
That's
I'm sorry
Yes.
about that. That was
You're
clean.
absolutely
I was
right.
clean. I'm just saying.
You're absolutely right. Car's clean, it's more professional typically, sometimes it's not. Do you use the star ranking?
I actually don't. I'm one of these guilty people driving a stupid large truck in Texas.
He refers to the initial discussion we had before the session, so, yeah.
Well, the reason why I say that is because you can, at the end of every Uber trip, you basically get to rank your driver, the 5-star system, and everybody, by the way, the driver gets to rank you as well as a passenger. You can get exiled from Uber. I actually have a friend who was exiled from Uber. He got reinstated, but it actually only took one trip, right? So there's my point is that there's a lot of reasons why you actually are willing to pay the premium, right? You're willing to pay that for the premium iPhone power, and it's around, in this case, in the Uber case, it's around convenience, it's around cleanliness, it's around professionalism, it's around a lot of things that is hard to put a dollar figure on, right? If you were to ask any Uber driver, you pay 20% more over a taxi cab, how much of that 20% would you attribute to, in the carbon footprint example, right, cleanliness? I don't know, but I do know that I'm willing to pay more for it. And that's when you figure this out. That's when it does become self-sustainable, right? And that's what we're really trying to talk about here, is how does it become self-sustainable? At TI, do you think that they would ever take a step back now and say, that next facility, it's not gonna be a lead facility, that was a waste? There's no way, right? There's no way, because they actually moved across the tipping point of where now every facility will be a LEED certified building, or at least.
It is, no, that's good. You must have read our corporate citizenship report.
Now, if I could add an interesting, you bring up a good point on Uber, but I want to take a little bit of the flip side of it. Uber is tangible. You can see it, you get the convenience, you enjoy the clean ride, the driver with the tie, you don't have to worry about cash, you know, all this convenience. I use Uber religiously. I've used Uber for the last 5 years or so. Probably should own stock in Uber, but electrons are not tangible.
Really? Go over there and turn off the lights.
That's when they become tangible. That's when, how many times do you think of your electric company? The only 2 times most people think of the electric company, and that's when your bill goes high or your power goes up. Do people actually spend time thinking about their utility beyond that?
If I told you I do, I'll probably lie, but
But
just to support the company, you know, yeah, I do.
But the reality of it, most people don't think about their utility company until you have those. So when you think of sustainability, how is it, you know, and there's a question of the utility, how do we make it tangible that people see what it is in terms of sustainability? And that's a challenge that utilities are faced with, because most consumers will never see the utility unless it's those 2 situations. So just to give a flip side of that scenario is that that's when I have issues with it. Now, on my iPhone, if I'm in an area without reception, but I have Wi-Fi, I can still do a bunch of things. So I have something that's still tangible, and that's why I like my iPhone. And so the question of how tangible does it become, and how do I know that my electron is green versus brown, becomes another question. Do electrons have color? Now, I am a physicist, so we're not going to get into that.
You know, this is actually an interesting point, because from my experience from Asia, where there's plenty of brownouts, blackouts, no electricity, we discovered that actually truly 90% of utilities do not know their customers in the context of behavioral aspect, therefore they cannot translate into a value proposition electrons, okay? I had this yesterday at the breakfast panel discussion. I had a discussion with one of the lady who runs the consumer platform, and she says they did some studies and they discovered that smart grid. I don't know if you guys familiar with smart grid. It's, you know, sexy word these days in the energy space. Okay, we are about 7+ years into a smart grid initiative on the utility side, and when they did studies, they discovered that more than 50% of customers don't even know, didn't even hear about smart grid and the value behind that specific industry trends. Which means we are, I believe, the Uber is an example of customer-centric business model. I truly believe that the problem we have with the discussion sustainability, because we are constantly looking inward in the context of organization rather than a customer component of how to really be competitive, how to really do something differently, etc. I know, but you want to ask?
I got to respond to.
Oh, please do, please.
So, before Uber, was the taxi cab tangible? Did you think about it every day? Did the taxi company, did you think about it?
Oh, I hated when I couldn't get a cab in DC.
Oh, well, yeah, you started on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Actually, I want to let.
Well, actually, if you can, you had a, I apologize, you had
Oh,
a
no problem.
different one.
So I'm chuckling because what you all are alluding to is how do you even define sustainability? So I work for NRG. We have a pretty robust sustainability policy. What's interesting though is in my role, I support the power plants and like the traditional, so coal, gas, and
We can cancel that, by the way, from the video, the call and big one, the dirty.
But so I support them from a purchasing perspective, and so I see this, like, you know, you use the term, it's a sexy word for smart grid. Well, sustainability has become a sexy word, but when you look it up in the dictionary, it really means the ability to endure, and you need financial stability to endure, whether it be in your personal life or as a corporation, right? So I have actually come to strongly dislike the word sustainability for what it stands for, which is a misnomer in some way to a lot of people. Like, they think it means recycling, they think it means do the right thing all the time, but really it means do the right thing for your organization to endure without having an impact. That's the way that I, you know, while minimizing your impact. So my question for you all is, have you had to tackle that, like actually defining what sustainability means to you, and how do you deal with the fact that sometimes that isn't necessarily what it's going to mean to other people or even to your stakeholders?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for bringing us back to reality. So I would say that in the case of my company, we deal with that every day with our end customer. Because, as I said, most of our customers justify putting our technology and our systems in through some sustainability type metric. But it comes down to, can we leverage assets in a different way, in a more intelligent, controlled, and optimized way, and have some financial benefit out of them? Two of my customers, as good examples, are two of the largest wastewater treatment facilities on the East Coast. And they love the story in terms of how they use our technology to take assets that are already pumping 100 million gallons of water every day. That's what they do. But they use them in a much more intelligent way to basically create a revenue stream coming out of the market. In this case, it's frequency. And that, for them, is a sustainable story because they're saying we're creating money and we're not having to go add a bunch of assets to our system. We're making our plants more efficient, et cetera. I have actually a couple of large coal-fired power plants where we're doing the same thing with ancillary pumps all throughout it. They view it as, we just made our coal plant 1% more efficient than the competitor's coal plant. That's how they look at it. That's a sustainable story for them. And so every single day we deal with that in terms of how do they justify it. It has to be justified on a financial basis. Our business is built around leveraging assets that already exist and leveraging them in a more intelligent and optimized way. So.
Yeah, I agree. The definition is very flexible. But I think, you've probably defined, same things I struggle with is what does it mean to my company, my organization? And I think like you, we look at, there are some things that we do better that are good for the planet that also are good for us financially. Energy and water savings, there's no argument there that it's good for all of the components. But in some of the areas, it's less obvious, but it's nice when you see your company really say that's an important thing to do. And the education piece could be argued that that's probably our biggest social. TI invests a lot in education in the local school districts and stuff. Now, it produces good engineers for us for the future and making good people who design in our products, right? But it's a very big help for society, probably bigger than just us. And that's an area I think we've put some money in that's a little less selfish than others. But you're right, it is a wide open definition. But at least if companies or people are saying, what does it mean to me, with my business, my impact on the planet, my impact on society, and can I improve a little bit of that, then that's a great start, right? At least do that.
Well, and great point for someone who has a utility as well. It's sustainability, you hear that word and you're going like, do people really know what it means? And but I think you even brought up a good point is that most utilities do not know their customers. And just as most of our customers only know us when the lights go out or the electric bill goes high, we also only know them when we respond to those issues. That's the only time we take time to know what their needs are. And so understanding the behavioral needs of your customers, I think, is where utilities and some of what we're starting to see is how, and electric co-ops in general have been very good at interacting with their customers. I mean, it's just, the electric co-op has more than just, if you look at my business card, it says Power of Community. You would think that's the name of the company because we're involved with the community more than just delivering electrons. But even then, we don't really know how our members use their energy and how we can help them. And so how do we work with our customers to ensure that they understand their usage, they kind of understand what it means for them to be sustainable. And I think that's one of the most difficult challenges. We just did a survey with our members and we got thousands of responses. Pretty much I could say a lot more than we expected because you don't always expect, your customers, because you expect they're only going to reach out to you when you have these issues. But we got these responses and it's kind of made us go back and think, how much are we actually having a conversation with them? How much are we discussing what it means to be 100% green, for example? What does it mean when we look at how much water is consumed based on generation, what we buy power? We're talking billions of gallons of water a year. And we know Texas has a serious water crisis, and so how do we have that discussion? And I think we're at the point of how do utilities move from this one concept of we've always done things this way, we've delivered elections, to how do we become true energy advisors to those who consume energy? And that question, I think it's something a lot of us are struggling with, and how do we really understand that? And that comes into understanding, how do you communicate with them? I mean, if I got an email saying that my usage today on my air conditioning was this much higher, I might have to think twice about maybe I can bump it up an extra degree tomorrow, and maybe, but does that actually really make a difference or not? Those are the questions that we're trying to ask as we define what sustainability means.
Since we work with a lot of disruptive technologies, we look at the sustainability in the context of how much more we can deliver incremental X-factor performance at the fraction of the cost. So for example, we have right now technology, wind-based technology that delivers electricity at 3.9 cents a kilowatt hour, 124 hours 7 without energy storage necessity. We have right now technology which we are testing with the City of London, trying to replace every sewer and water pumps. They have 57 sewer and water pumps, huge, size of coffee tables. Each pump is the size of coffee tables, and we are right now testing technology that can basically reduce the footprint from 57 to 10 pumps, 1/10 physical dimension, 70% improvement in energy efficiency. We have right now one technology for wireless power transfer. So I'm saying we're looking at how can we deliver performance at X scale at the very small incremental cost, because at the end of the day, the truth is that, listen, I had a situation in GE when we were trying to introduce a medical equipment in China, and we're doing this as a hardware base, and we discovered that people in the emerging countries, they cannot afford expensive equipment for the same level of functionality and performance. And we had to actually introduce a software-based approach to deliver the same performance at the 1/10 of the cost. So, that opens the eye in the context of, how do you deal with the customer aspect, with affordability, with the technology component, and everything. So, in our case, we define again sustainability by a very simple math. On the cost side, 1 + 1 less than 2. On the benefit side, 1 + 1 more than 2. And that's how we look at every single portfolio technology and that kind of thing. So that was actually a very good question. Before we have like 5 minutes left, I know you had a question.
Oh, and I don't want to digress in the conversation too much, but I think Peter really hit the difference between the utilities and Uber. Taxis were allowed to become dirty and inefficient and unreliable and unprofessional, and utilities don't have that luxury. They have one day of outages, and it's very public, and it hits them financially, it hits them in their ratings. And so I guess first I wonder if taxis were just not even allowed to get to that point. I would never look for an Uber, right? If they were just allowed to deteriorate. And I think we're spoiled, and it gives us a sense of entitlement that when I throw the switch, the lights come on. And the same thing with water. I mean, I live in Denver, there's people relocating from all over the country. They're moving farther and farther out into the desert, but they still want their green lawn from where they came from. That's my right. I'm entitled to that green lawn, I'm entitled to that water, and I'm gonna keep watering the desert. Just find the water. If you can't find it, get it from the ocean and desalinate it, right? And I think that begs the point about sustainability. We're very spoiled. And I'm not trying to single anybody out, but we all still drive our big trucks. We also, we're not doing things to fix that, so.
Well, that would go back to my market issue. We have designed a market that by design is not meant to be sustainable.
Right.
So all the price signals say, hey, drive a big truck. There's no consequence.
Right.
So, only because I brought up the Uber example, I have to at least continue the example through. By the way,
You have to defend yourself now.
Yeah, I do. I do actually agree with the point in terms of the distinction between taxi cabs in this country and the electric utility industry. Absolutely agree with that. One point in London, highly regulated taxi cab industry, probably some of the best, cleanest, most controlled taxi cabs in the world are in London. Uber's still making an impact, right? And they're making an impact because of other reasons. not because of the dirty, the cleanliness. That's the one that hits home here, particularly when you get in a cab in some cities. So it's about the business model, is I think the point. And when the business model begins to shift, you either are going to shift with it or you're gonna die. And I think that's the taxi cab industry is starting to evolve. I mean, we've now seen New York actually bring in new legislation and new regulatory rulings around their taxi cab industry that are allowing the actual yellow cabs to participate in Uber. And guess what? The taxi cab industry is starting to turn itself around in New York. What a shock. So it's about when you see the business model begin to change and we start being very customer-centric and customer-focused, that's what we need to start seeing in this industry.
Do you think utilities are even allowed, enabled, permitted to be creative with business models like that?
No.
I don't think so either. I don't think it's the utilities, I think it's the regulators.
Well, let's be careful with that statement. I don't work for the regulator, by the way, they don't pay me to defend them, but I've done a lot of rate cases for utilities, for the regulators. There are symptoms, California, New York, other places where, even Maryland, where public utility commissions are trying to understand how to be innovative in partnership with utilities. The problem is that listen, I've been telling this, and I have an argument with a couple folks on the LinkedIn about this who are on the regulatory side. You cannot put innovation, I don't care if it's sustainability, affordability, anything in the same bucket like regulation. The regulation operates based on the historical performance, based on the historical mindset, KPIs. So every time you bring something new, obviously they don't know how to create a new business model, how to get out of the asset-based recovery versus performance-based recovery. And they are going there. Interestingly, regulators outside of North America where the investment into innovation has to leapfrog, like Asia, went from analog telecom to 4G overnight, because they understood to catch up with the progress they had to do leapfrog. So kind of regulators were on the backside and industry was leading. That's not good also. But there are good stories in North America about regulators, but I also believe that market should be 100% market competitive.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's a reality when you have something that's so heavily reliant on infrastructure like a utility. I mean, this country started out with every man for his, every company puts up a wire, and that, I could never see us going back to that. I think it would be a mess. And so that's.
I think if I can just add a point to it, and I completely agree with you that we're faced with a lot of challenges, and I think, I think of myself as a child, and that moment when you went from being 2 feet tall to 5 feet tall overnight. And it was very painful, and I think where we are is we're at that point of starting to experience some growth pains in terms of how do we start thinking of how we, and I'm not sure, I do agree with you, we're very reliant on a very heavily infrastructure-based system, and the electric grid in the US has been one of the greatest innovations of the 20th century, and everyone is saying now we're in the 21st century, what are we going to do differently? And I think it has to come down to really rethinking what your culture is. Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so if we don't rethink how and I'm not sure we have the answers yet. And I think this is where one of the questions, I should say not the answers, but one of the pathways is becoming more of a customer-centric submission, really taking time to understand what your customers want, and really sitting down to define what does sustainability mean. I think once we do those things, we may not go completely away from a heavily, baseload will still be something that's necessary. As much as we want to say it's going to go away, baseload power is still going to be something because people still want, when you switch those, they still want that. But how do we really work with the consumers to ensure that they really understand that? And I think as we experience that, we'll face issues of regulations that you're stuck with not being able to do things because you're heavily regulated, you have assets that are 30 to 50 years, that there's cost recovery expected, and all these different things. But as long as you can take all of that, as well as include the customer-centric part of it, we may start seeing a pathway towards some better solutions.
With that, we are, I can barely see that clock, I'm kind of guessing it's 9:35, something like this. We were asked to finish at 9:35. It's almost impossible to summarize this discussion, except for I think we want more, and I'll kind of pick on that here a bit. We need more Uber-like energy businesses to truly help us understand probably sometimes the business model, customer engagement, therefore drive social responsibility and what it means. And anyway, with that, I would like to say thank you very much to our panelists. That was a very good discussion. Thank you very much for participation here from the audience. That was very engaging. I appreciate that. So again, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.